I cannot believe that it's August already and back to school is here or on deck for most of us. That means new rhythms and routines, whether figuring out how to get out the door in the morning or having a plan for what happens between the end of the school day and dinner and beyond. Fat Brain Toys is here to help with at least one aspect of that new schedule. With their fidget and sensory toys that help busy brains unwind at the end of a long day, Fat Brain Toys offers a variety of child-driven play experiences that will keep both their mind and their body active. Almost all of the toys and games are screen-free, but what I appreciate most about Fat Brain Toys is that they encourage kids to get creative and explore the world around them through open-ended play. And if you have a young builder, architect, sculptor, maker living under your roof, you'll want to check out the Plip Kit. It comes with over 45 flexible pieces kids can use to create complex prisms, swirling patterns, really anything that they want. And the special Plip Connect system is designed with easy ball and socket ends that make this flexible construction kit an especially satisfying experience for kids who may be working on their fine and gross motor skills. Fat Brain Toys is a family-run business that has been curating and creating quality toys, games, and gifts that both entertain and educate for more than 20 years. Fat Brain has put together a collection of toys for our families. Go to fatbraintoys.com/tilt to get 10% off all the items in the Tilt collection when you use the code TILT at checkout. And find out for yourself why Fat Brain Toys is a smarter way to play.
I needed something that was sort of really exciting for me to read. And I started to develop all these other strategies still that I use to this day, which is when I'm reading and I'm starting from the beginning of something, usually my mind starts to wander really quickly. And then what I'll do is I'll jump to the end and start reading backwards. And what that does is it sort of prompts my mind to be challenged because I don't really understand what's happening. So I have to read from the beginning to figure out, to sort of connect all the dots. So to almost turn it into like a problem-based learning kind of strategy to heighten my, kind of excite my brain in ways that will allow me to focus more.
I'm Debbie Reber, and welcome to Tilt Parenting, a podcast featuring interviews and conversations aimed at inspiring, informing, and supporting parents raising differently wired kids. Okay, so I'll just say right at the top that my guest today is not a parenting expert. He is, however, a neurodivergent researcher, educator, author, and thinker who has some fascinating things to share about helping our kids tap into their unique power and strengths. Dr. Jeff Karp was that young kid who struggled greatly in school because of his learning disabilities. But when a tutor during the summer after second grade asked him this question, "How did you think about that?" everything for him changed. He began to be more self-reflective, and by thinking about thinking and how he approached learning, he was able to explore and create tools and systems to help him reach his goals both in school and in daily life. Jeff is still thinking about thinking today, and he shares his ideas in his fascinating book, Lit, Life Ignition Tools. Use nature's playbook to energize your brain, spark ideas, and ignite action. After I read his book, I wanted to bring Jeff onto the show because he embodies so much of what we talk about here at Tilt, encouraging our kids to understand how their brain works, get curious about their own strengths and gifts, and figure out ways to hack themselves so they can design lives that allow them to play to those strengths. As a child, Jeff developed ways to navigate school and life that were based on his curiosity, passion, creativity, and connection to nature. And over the years, he's evolved his approach into Lit, his life ignition tools, and he wrote this book to share them with the rest of the world. Jeff has a very busy life and is incredibly accomplished. I couldn't possibly share all of his credentials, but here are a few highlights. Dr. Jeff Karp holds the Distinguished Chair at Brigham and Women's Hospital and is a professor at Harvard Medical School and MIT. He's an elected fellow of the National Academy of Inventors, Royal Society of Chemistry, American Institute for Medical and Biological Engineering, just to name a few. Specializing in bio-inspired medical innovation, Jeff leads a research lab focused on harnessing lessons from nature. He holds over 100 patents, and his lab's technologies have led to the formation of 13 companies. He's also dedicated to mentoring the next generation of bioengineers. I find Jeff's approach, as well as his tools and concepts like the low energy brain dimmer switch and a motivational tool called bothered awareness, super interesting. Not to mention his story is highly inspirational for all of us raising kids who struggle in traditional school environments. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. Hey Jeff, welcome to the podcast.
Hi there. So nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. And I'm looking forward to talking about your work and your life and your new book. I've read your bio, but you're so much more than your bio. I would love if we could really start the conversation with you telling us a bit about your story, being this young child identified with learning disabilities and ADHD. I mean, that's really where it all started, I think, for where you are today. So tell us a little bit about your story.
Yeah, well, let's go back to the second grade, which is really where things started to materialize in a really significant way and led to a transformative experience, actually, that changed my life and led to a lot of processes and tools and strategies that I still use to this day. When I was in the second grade, just nothing was sinking in. Nothing was working. My mom tried flashcards. She tried cue cards, phonics, everything. And I wasn't able to keep up with anything that was being taught. I wasn't socially connecting with anyone. I'd sit at the back of the class, frustrated, kind of feeling demoralized and like I didn't fit in, like I was an alien. And at the end of the second grade, my teacher, Mr. Steadwell, pulled my parents aside and said that he thought it would be a good idea for me to repeat the second grade. And my parents negotiated that if I spent the summer with tutors to catch up, that I could go on to the third grade. So all my classmates went on vacation, and here I am in summer school. I would go in every day, and the tutors would ask me questions and read passages and do all sorts of activities. But there's one day in particular that really stands out, a question that the tutor asked that literally changed my life. But what happened is I went in and the tutor on this day read a passage, asked me questions as she usually did, and I gave my answers. But after I gave my answers, she paused and looked me in the eye and said, "How did you think about that?" And that question is one that no one had ever asked me before. And it sent me into this kind of self-reflection mode. It was like all of a sudden I had this awareness, to think about thinking. And I started to bring that awareness to everything in my life. I started to observe patterns of behaviors of other children in the class and what they were saying, what they were doing, and sort of in a context-dependent manner, trying to understand. I would notice thoughts in my mind and sort of realize that I could shape my thoughts before speaking. I started to tap into the fact that learning happened for me after I asked questions. And so anytime I asked a question, I was able to hyper-focus for a few moments afterwards, and anything that was being said would imprint in my mind. I could connect it to other things. I could think about it and focus my attention on it, and I could recall it later. Otherwise, just sitting in the class and being kind of lectured to, that just didn't work for me. In fact, in college, even when I was at McGill University in engineering, I stopped going to some of my classes where I couldn't ask questions because it would just bring me too much anxiety and frustration. And so I found other ways to learn. And all throughout high school, I would be asking teachers constantly to meet with me after class. I'd go in on weekends, many weekends. I remember driving or walking over to the school to get help and to ask questions. And so those were kind of the early days. I was a C&D student for much of elementary school, but that changed in the seventh grade when my mom went up against the school board. So really, like a warrior mom, because they didn't want to recognize me as having a learning difference. ADHD wasn't really talked about too much back then. And my mom had created this massive file of everything that had ever been said about me or written about me. She went up against the school board and actually got me identified as having learning differences. And my grades went from C's and D's to straight A's.
Oh my gosh. There's so much in that story that you just shared. First of all, what an incredible question, and how fortuitous that the teacher asked you that question and the way that you responded to it. how did you think about that? So you mentioned in 7th grade when your mom really advocated and you got this identification, and then I imagine you got accommodations that really allowed you to be in your strength zone. Just even going back a little bit, after you had this aha moment and started thinking about your own thinking that summer after 2nd grade, what did it look like? How did that actually translate in the next couple of years? I'm just curious.
Yeah, so in the 3rd grade, we moved out to the country and we were outside city limits. And so there was a farmer's field in our backyard. There was a sheep farm beside us, a buffalo farm across the road. We had a creek. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, there'd be a pack of wolves on the front lawn. And the reason I'm mentioning this is because that had a profound effect on me with this newly found awareness. Because I would get off the bus and I would be just, ruminating and exhausted, trying to fit in, trying to assimilate, trying to figure out how could I fit into this world that just seemed so foreign to me at school. And so I would just be really tired and, I'd walk home. But as I was walking, I noticed, well, first of all, there were no phones or anything like that back then. We're going back to 1983, 84 kind of time frame. And I would just look into the trees. Like my driveway was literally carved through a forest. It was 1,000 feet long. And I developed this connection with nature. I noticed how, as I was walking home, this sort of like frustration and tiredness, just looking at the trees and looking at sort of everything around me, all this life, it calmed me. And I started to really develop a deep relationship with nature. So that was one thing that was really sort of helpful for me back then. I felt like I was being hugged by nature, actually, as I walked, along this laneway or driveway home. I also, one day I was walking and I noticed something I'd never seen before. And I got up closer and closer and closer because I couldn't figure it out. And then I was like face to face and it was a bat. And I'd never seen a bat before. And what was really amazing to me was how all the thoughts in my mind, everything I was ruminating about that day at school, whatever it was like those thoughts got squeezed out and all I could think about was the bat. I was, first of all, amazed to see a bat, but I was also amazed at, I was like, wait a moment, my brain is now laser focused on the bat and not all these other things that I was just thinking about a moment before. So I started to think, okay, are there ways that I might be able to use this as a tool? Like, could I use this as a way to focus my attention in class beyond just asking questions and sort of paying attention to the answers or the first few moments of the answers? And I started experimenting with that. And I was able to kind of cultivate my attention. I think about this as pinching my brain as a way to using my intention to focus my attention. When I was younger, I had really a lot of trouble reading. And the only thing that I could read was really joke books and fact books, where there was like single sentence or 2-sentence kind of things. And eventually, as I started to hone my attention more and more through kind of pinching my brain, I started to get into choose your own adventure books. But I needed something that was sort of really exciting for me to read. And I started to develop all these other strategies still that I use to this day, which is when I'm reading, and I'm starting from the beginning of something, usually my mind starts to wander really quickly. And then what I'll do is I'll jump to the end and start reading backwards. And what that does is it sort of prompts my mind to be challenged because I don't really understand what's happening. So I have to read from the beginning to figure out, to sort of connect all the dots. So to almost turn it into like a problem-based learning kind of strategy to excite my brain in ways that will allow me to focus more.
I'm so fascinated by this conversation already. Let's take a quick break, and then I want to talk a little bit more about your parents' role back then, and then we'll get into your book. These days, I'm embracing any and all systems and products that give me simple ways to support my family while reducing my personal stress. And that's exactly what HelloFresh is all about. With HelloFresh, I can skip trips to the grocery store and make home cooking easy, fun, and affordable. That's why HelloFresh is America's #1 meal kit. Side note, HelloFresh was the very first meal kit our family started using years ago. In fact, it was over HelloFresh dinners that I talked with Darren and Ash about my big plans for Tilt Parenting way back when. And it was through HelloFresh that we really started adding food diversity and a love of cooking back into our lives. With the changing menu of 50 recipes to choose from each week, HelloFresh makes it easy to always find something that will hit the spot for everyone in the family. Their easy to follow recipes include pre-portioned ingredients delivered fresh, so no last-minute grocery store run required. Just choose your delivery date, open your box, and get cooking. And HelloFresh's line of kid-friendly family options means even the pickiest of eaters will be part of the Clean Plate Club this back-to-school season. And Green Chef, who is also a sponsor of this show, is now owned by HelloFresh. And with a wider array of meal plans to choose from, there's really something for everyone. I love switching between the brands, and now my listeners can enjoy both brands at a discount with me. And for a limited time, kids eat free. Go to HelloFresh.com/tiltkids to unlock this exclusive offer. 1 free kids meal per box for 2 months while your subscription is active. That's free kids meals just by going to HelloFresh.com/tiltkids. HelloFresh, America's #1 meal kit. Our family has just moved back to Amsterdam, the land of beautiful canals and weather that can turn on a dime. It's also a city where we're outside on foot or bike every single day, so what I'm wearing has to comfortably get me through whatever the day has in store. Even an out-of-the-blue downpour like the one Darren and I got caught in while shopping for a cat litter box, a fan, and a few other essentials for our new place. You guys already know that I'm a big fan of Vessie's waterproof shoes. Our whole family wears them, so I'm really jazzed about this new vintage-style shoe Vessie's just come out with. They're called Courtside Classics, and they're a 90s inspired shoe that look great with just about any outfit while also being super comfortable. Like my other Vessies, the Courtside Classics are easy slip-ons with Vessie's signature snug, cozy fit because of the shoe's padded tongue and collar. I so appreciate what the Vessie brand is all about, encouraging people to enjoy the benefits of getting outside no matter the forecast. Whether it's going for a walk for a mental reset, standing on the sidelines of the world's soggiest soccer field, or getting the dog out for a spin around the neighborhood, Vessies make sure we can enjoy it all while avoiding any of that dreaded wet socks experience. Step up your style with Vessie Courtside Classics, their latest waterproof sneakers reminiscent of the 90s. Head to Vessie.com/tilt for waterproof shoes that go with all your outfits and get an automatic 15% off your first order at checkout. That's VESSI.com/tilt to receive your 15% discount. In these hot, humid August days in the Northeast, it's really easy to get dehydrated, especially if you're out and about exercising or gardening or just running around juggling all the things like the parent you are. But what I've learned is that being optimally hydrated involves more than just making sure you drink enough water or lemonade or iced tea. The science shows that it means optimizing your body's fluid ratios, including electrolytes. That's why these days I've been staying hydrated with Element. Element is a zero-sugar drink mix designed for better hydration, created with a science-backed electrolyte ratio of sodium, potassium, and magnesium. That strong dose of electrolytes matters because while electrolyte deficiency or imbalance can cause headaches, cramps, fatigue, brain fog, and weakness, optimal electrolyte levels can help do things like reduce muscle cramps, promote better sleep, and support better digestion. Since I've been taking Element, I've noticed a boost in my energy levels and also just feeling more generally on top of things when it comes to my ability to do focused, productive work. And I'm pretty psyched about that because I'm juggling perhaps a few too many things at the moment and I need all the help I can get. Element has a special free gift with purchase for our Tilt parenting community. Get your free Element sample pack with any purchase at drinkelement.com/tilt. That's DRINKLMNT.com/tilt. Also, try the new Element Sparkling, a bold 16-ounce can of sparkling electrolyte water. I love how you were just describing the way that you got so curious and were always kind of questioning your own process. One of the tilts that I mention in my book, Differently Wired, is to help our kids embrace self-discovery, because I think that is just so critical. And it sounds like that's just naturally who you were. You were always getting curious about, why do I think this way? how can I use this? How can I hack myself from a very young age? And you mentioned your mom really stepping in to push for more supports at school when you were in middle school. But can you talk about your parents' role, if any, what role they may have played in you being the kind of thinker that you are and how they may have fostered or supported or encouraged this type of thinking?
Absolutely. Yeah. Thinking both with my mom and my dad. So just starting with my mom, one of the things that was transformational for me is when I was kind of early in elementary school, when I was a C&D student and not connecting with peers, I had very few things to sort of be confident about. I was always the last picked for basketball or soccer or baseball, whatever people were doing. And, that started to really take a toll on me. And a couple things that my mom did made a massive difference. One is I was getting a lot of labels, from the teachers. So I was being told I was lazy, that I was never going to amount to anything. At one point, I was helping someone else in the class with something, and the teacher came over and said, "Oh, isn't that like the blind leading the blind?" And, of course, I had to go home and ask my mom what that meant, and she wasn't too happy. People called me a lost cause and, all kinds of things. So one thing that my mom did is she helped me to understand that these labels, that I didn't need to believe them, and that there was something deeper, that I had this potential, almost like superpowers. And, she kind of told me that like over and over and over again, to the point where I started to believe it. Like I literally remember times when I was in elementary school and being taught things, and I'd be sitting there thinking like, I wonder if there's something more to this, or I wonder if there's something deeper here. And, I would try to think beyond what I was being told. And not that anything really came to mind immediately, but it just that sort of sense that there might be a deeper level of understanding or a different way to think about things. I think it was kind of a really interesting way to focus my attention, because I started to develop tools to actually do that over time, almost like helped me to cultivate like superpowers by being told that I had these superpowers. I mean, initially I didn't really believe it, but over time I was like, hey, wait a moment. Oh, and then the other thing with my mom is that this was huge. There were these speech competitions. I think they started in the 4th grade. And initially they were like 3 minutes, and maybe they went to 5 or 8 or something like that. But my mom would write the speeches for me and then coach me in memorizing. And I always had a really hard time memorizing things, but it was kind of like through that process of like, okay, I got like 3 words and then a sentence and then the next sentence. And I started to sort of realize, wait a moment, it was almost like I was tapping into my neuroplasticity. I started to realize like, wait a moment, I'm starting to get this. This is really interesting. And I started to develop confidence around it. And she coached me in how to say the speeches. And I started winning competitions, and I was the kid to beat in the school. And, there was a couple times where I won the competition for the whole school, and I went on to compete against other schools. And so that one thing, like, it just seems to me like that was so instrumental in my life to give me one thing to gain confidence in, to be able to tap into neuroplasticity, to be able to tap into sort of my potential and be able to track it myself and see that I actually had something deep within that was only surfacing because of this process I was engaging with my mom. And I think, for other kids and things, I think that can come from mentors or teachers or parents. I feel, especially kids who are neurodiverse, just sort of connecting to my own personal story, it seems to me that every kid needs that one thing to be able to develop a skill and gain, confidence, even if it's incremental, like to be able to hold, because that sort of gave me confidence, not just in that, but that, wait a moment, maybe I could apply this to other things and, expand. And so that was really the nucleating sort of, I think, experience in my life that I was able to then go on and do all these other things and just build off of it. Because it's almost like when you have something like that, no one can take it away from you. And you can always, in your mind, reflect back to it and say, oh, this is a new skill. Maybe it's like the speech competition. Maybe there's a process. And I started to realize that whenever I wasn't good at something, whenever I couldn't do something, I started to realize, I was like, wait a moment, it's not an absolute situation. This isn't something that will never change. I just need to find a process that works for me. And the process I engage with my mom worked for me. And so that's how I started to kind of venture on in life and that's how I was able to develop a lot of skills is by searching for processes that work for me. And then just one other thing to add is my dad. So he was really, I would say he's really creative and he loved nature. And so we would go for drives on the weekend, like just around farm country. And we'd go to like flea markets, and he was into arts and crafts and always asking questions, lots and lots of questions about how things worked. And so I think that really sparked my curiosity, and it really allowed me to start looking at things through the lens of curiosity, which I think is really like a life force that we all can tap into. I think kind of the current state of affairs with this digital world that we live in, I was just thinking about this morning, is that, we tend to get our this life force of curiosity gets hijacked constantly and leads to sort of things that are not sustainable or fulfilling. But through this experience with my dad, I realized it deepened my connection with nature.
So good. So good. So I have one more question that I have to ask, because you shared the experience you had of being labeled as this kind of a lost cause as a student by teachers and just clearly not understood. And if we look at what I read in the introduction here, you have done a lot in your life. You're very accomplished. And I just wonder, is there a little part of you that wants to go back to those elementary school teachers and be like, hello, like, have you had that moment? Have you let it go? Was that influential in you being who you are today?
I've tried to apply this awareness, my newly found awareness in between the second and third grade to everything in my life. And I look at everything almost as algorithms these days. In fact, I feel, we might call them habits, but in some ways I feel like it's important to call them algorithms because of just the way that the digital age is upon us and how it's a way of thinking like these are not necessarily our algorithms. These are other people's algorithms. But to get at your question, so I've been trying to break through those algorithms to be able to reflect on what were those teachers going through at that time, and what were their experiences. And I think being a teacher is a really difficult job. It's really freaking hard, right? To have 30 or whatever students in a class and to have kids who are neurodiverse, and, any one person, including the teacher, only has a certain amount of attention and cognitive kind of capacity, at any particular moment. And so I get it. I get how things are, but I don't feel anything negative towards any of those teachers whatsoever. In fact, I think some of the things that they said to me and, kind of reflecting on this awareness, I feel like it pushed me throughout my life, and maybe even still to this day, it's part of the fire beneath me. It's like, I feel like I'm always trying to prove somebody wrong, or like, I can do it, or it's sort of like, I've been sort of trying to figure out like, where does my sort of deep motivation come from? And I think that might be part of it. Unfortunately, a lot of kids who are neurodiverse fall through the cracks. They don't have the support that they need. And these labels can really take a major toll on them, even if they have supportive parents. Everybody, just the diversity of how we process emotional experiences, and one comment can negatively impact somebody for the rest of their lives and set up all these triggers, right? And so I think a lot about the other children who have been subjected to some of the things that I have been. And just, I think a lot of people who are neurodiverse can fall through the cracks of life, and yet they have so much potential to contribute in so many positive ways and use the neurodiversity as a superpower. I kind of think like it's more, not necessarily the teachers, but it's more the institutional kind of aspect, the foundation of how education is conducted. And I think there's much better ways. And I feel like the education system is in the process of being disrupted just based on the number of conversations that I'm hearing about it.
Thank you for going with me on that little tangent. So we're going to take a quick break, and then I want to get into your book called Lit. So we'll be right back.
Interrompemos esse podcast para perguntar: quem você quer ser?
Designer, engenheira, pedagoga,
administrador.
Quer saber? O Senac EAD é nota máxima no MEC. Tem cursos de diversas áreas, com conteúdo elaborado por especialistas do mercado e professores mestres e doutores. Ainda tem o Senac Carreiras, conectando estudantes a vagas de emprego em todo o país. Saiba mais em ead.senac.br/graduação.
Você que está ouvindo o seu podcast e curte fazer um bom negócio, vai aí uma dica imperdível. A nova Chevrolet S10 está na sua melhor versão, bruta e macia ao mesmo tempo. De um lado, toda a força e potência de uma picape bruta, invocada e conectada. Do outro, todo o conforto que só a nova suspensão proporciona, muito mais macia e silenciosa, deixando suas viagens ainda mais confortáveis. É a nova S10 que você conhece e confia, ainda mais bruta. Brutalmente macia. Acesse chevrolet.com.br para saber mais.
Lynn, this time of year, parenting can be such a flusterclux.
You've come to the right place. I'm Lynn Lyons, and I've been treating anxious families for over 30 years.
I'm Lynn's sister-in-law and co-host Robin Hudson.
Join us for Flusterclux, a podcast for parents who worry.
Wait, that's everybody.
Yeah, these last few years have felt like one long anxiety attack for so many.
Why do you think parents are always surprised that a podcast about anxiety relates to them, even if no one in their house has an anxiety disorder?
Well, worry is human. Everyone does it. And anxiety shows up when we face uncertainty.
All the parenting tips you've taught me have been essential.
I love to break it down into skills we need to manage worry in our families.
We've covered so many topics: depression, burnout, meltdowns, perfectionism.
Don't forget scary mothers-in-law.
Right, but of course that's not my mother-in-law.
Because that's my mother.
And a listener.
As a psychotherapist, I like to teach parents and kids how to respond to everyday moments in healthy ways.
Managing anxiety really can be taught.
It really can, and I'll even tell you what to say.
We talk about serious stuff, but without being too serious.
Anxiety wants everything serious. Anxiety doesn't stand a chance when we're laughing, even about the tough stuff.
Okay, so I want to pivot now. First of all, thank you for sharing so much of your story. It's just so helpful for parents raising neurodivergent kids to hear from neurodivergent adults what made the difference for them, what their journey looked like, and have a sense of how that can inform the adult that they become. And so you have a new book out. It's called LIT. LIT stands for Life Ignition Tools. And the subtitle is Use Nature's Playbook to Energize Your Brain, Spark Ideas, and Ignite Action. So could we start by talking about what LIT is? Tell us a little bit about that concept.
LIT is all about intercepting our routine patterns to actively think and decide versus just jump in with habitual responses. And to me, it's really about resensitizing our aliveness. When we're children, we're just so tapped into the life force, curiosity and imagination and love and deep connections with everything around us. And I think that our culture really has atomized our attention, flattened our imagination, flattened our curiosity. And I think there are many ways to get it back. And so LIT is really a book with many, many on-ramps to living more intentionally and thinking more deliberately and taking intentional actions and reawakening our senses so we can deepen our experiences with the world and really come into alignment with what's really at our core.
Do you see it as the book that is what you've discovered throughout your life of how you've kind of thought about thinking and how you have really learned to, again, I'm using this term hack yourself, but really identify the things that have allowed you to create and be the person you are in the world? Is this kind of your playbook in that way?
Yeah. And it's an interesting way to think about it. The tools in the book didn't come out of my laboratory at Harvard Medical School. They actually came out of my laboratory for life and through my experiences. So, exactly as you put it, and just kind of tinkering along the way. Initially, I was struggling a lot in school and I needed to develop tools to survive. And eventually, as I started to develop these tools and then was identified with having learning differences and got some accommodations, a little extra time and space, I was able to then apply these tools in a really significant way and evolve the tools. And in fact, I would say my laboratory It's a biomedical engineering laboratory. We develop all kinds of different medical technologies and then bring those technologies to clinical trials and to patients. And my lab, I say, is focused on the process of medical problem solving. There's no specific disease focus or specific technology focus. It's really an ever evolving iterative process, which mimics the process that I have sort of been on this adventure in the world to iterate and evolve and learn, and with all these perturbations that we're constantly having in our lives, kind of like what happens in nature. And for me, maybe just one other thing to add is that I almost, as I look back, I almost feel like if I go way back, it was like, an analogy to a computer, like where I had this hardware and I knew I had this hardware, but I didn't have software that worked for me. And what I needed to do was figure out how to program that software. And so I would observe very intensely. And I think this is why I was so exhausted every day when I came home. I would just be observing how people behaved in various situations. And then I would try that on. I would hear people's opinions and I wouldn't have an opinion, but I would take on that opinion. And then when the conversation came up, I would state the opinion and see what the reaction was. And then I would update it based on what reactions I got. And I sort of started to do that, and I would learn sort of how other people behave in the world. And I would mimic those behaviors in a very intentional way. And then I would see how do people respond when I behave that way. And through that iterative process, I was able to develop all of these tools and strategies that worked for me and gave me ways of kind of intercept. Because I think people tend to just do what they know or what they experience, and then they just do that for the rest of their lives. I noticed that intensely in my lab. Like if someone trains in a research lab and then they come to my lab, they tend to think like the process of thinking in that previous lab. They tend to conduct their presentations the same way as everybody in that lab did, or write papers in the same way. My whole life has really been about almost like testing out algorithms that I see around me in the world and then constantly updating and iterating them. And I think through that, I've been able to kind of discover that there's many things that we can do that can bring in fresh energy into our lives, that can deepen connections with the world around us and with other people, that can really set us on a path of positive mental health and well-being. And that's what the book is really, about, is giving people strategies and tools and approaches to intercept their patterns, to live more fulfilling lives and be more connected with each other and with nature.
And just for listeners, this is not a parenting book. First of all, on a personal level, I found super fascinating. These are all things that I'm super interested in, is just better understanding and disrupting processes and always looking for ways to maximize my own creativity and output and all of those things. And because you're writing it through the lens of who you are as a neurodivergent adult and the life experiences you've had and what shaped your thinking, it's also, I think, such a useful resource for parents to understand how to help their kids have this curiosity about who they are and tap into their own strengths in that way. I'm curious to know, when you were writing it, who were you thinking would be the ideal reader for your book?
Well, that's always like a tough question to answer, because actually when I was contacted to write, an editor, Heather Jackson, reached out to me to write a book. She had read something about some of the work we do in bioinspiration in my laboratory. So turning to nature to be inspired to bring in fresh ideas to solve medical problems. And I thought about it and I was like, I'd like to write about that, but I want to write about my struggles with learning differences and all the tools and strategies that I developed, because I just want to share them with the world. And that was really at the core. I've just always had this desire. Like, I feel like throughout my life, I've been able to tap into these insights, and that can be really helpful to me, but helpful to others. And I just have this wiring where I've constantly felt an urgent need to share it with others. And so when I give scientific presentations, for example, I just I've never really shown much data. I tell stories and I try to illuminate the insights of what we learned along the way that can help other people in their journeys. And so I never really sort of thought of a particular target audience. It was more of just sharing and hoping that it would resonate with as many people possible.
That's great. There's so many great little concepts in here that felt very sticky to me. One of them is you talk about the Leb dimmer switch. Could you explain what that is?
Yeah, absolutely. That refers to low energy brain state. To me, I like to think about what I'm up against, right? And there's two major things that I feel like I'm up against, and potentially everybody's kind of up against. So one is that for tens of thousands of years, up until about 10 to 15,000 years ago, we were all hunter-gatherers. We were outside working hard. We needed to gravitate to this state where our brains were conserving energy. Our bodies were conserving energy. You never knew when we were going to run out of resources and have to move or run away from something or hunt or, whatever it was. And that wiring is still with us today. We haven't evolved away from it. So we're at this snapshot in evolution where we still have that primitive wiring. So our brains gravitate to a low energy state, and people can recognize it. Like, for example, if you drive your car from point A to point B, sometimes you forget the route you took. You can't even recall it because your brain was gravitating to this low energy state. Or you might be eating and you finish a meal, you're shocked it's done, you can't remember a flavor. You lose your keys, but later find out it's in your pocket. You walk into a room, you forget why you walked into that room. You have trouble getting yourself up off the couch or wherever you are to go exercise. It's like exercising doesn't make sense if you're working to survive in life because you're already outside kind of doing the hard work. So we gravitate to this low energy brain state and actually low energy body state as well. The other thing we're up against, which makes it like way worse, is that there's $900 billion with a B spent every year on marketing and advertising to hijack our attention. And so we have this wiring to gravitate to the low energy brain and body state. And now we're subjected to this massive force, almost $1 trillion of marketing and advertising every year, and all these algorithms. And who's ever behind the algorithms actually is exerting control over us, kind of serving us what we're sort of led to believe. What's important is really what's behind it is other people's definition of importance, but not our own. And it creates this fog. It's hard for us to tap into our internal cues and the core wisdom that we all have. And so that makes us susceptible, this low energy brain and body state, to this massive advertising and marketing force. And it's hard then to be intentional because we're living others' intentions, right? So to me, we need tools, we need strategies, we need practices, we need rituals in our daily lives to intercept and develop an awareness to be able to tap into the cues from our brains. Our bodies are very intelligent, our interactions from other people. We need to create space to press pause and to reflect on our experiences and what we're learning and to catch up. Our brain needs to sync up. And so that's a big part of LIT, is to provide those on-ramps, those strategies to intercept and help us to peel away the layers and really connect with our core values and help us to create rituals and practices that can lead to more intention in our thinking and our actions.
I love that so much. One of the quotes I pulled from the book, you said, metaphorically, LIT is the swift kick that breaks through inertia and gets the ball rolling. In my experience, whether the inertia is due to outside resistance, habit, apathy, or just a law that's lingered too long through the years into this day, and to this day, when I'm in this brain state, nothing can stop me. I am LIT. That seems like it really kind of sums up. You're really helping people learn how to activate to do the things that they know that they want to do, right?
100%. Yep.
Another concept that I love if you could talk to us about is this idea of bothered awareness. Can you explain what that is? I thought it was really fascinating.
Yeah, to me, bothered awareness is really at the core of what can motivate us to do the work that we really want to do, to tap into our deep intention. And I think in our lives, as we go on and we have certain thoughts, we, have certain actions, certain interactions with other people, we start to experience pain points. There might be things that we say to somebody or in a certain tone, and we might see their facial expressions, and we might sort of realize that there may be another way of saying it. There might be another way of connecting with somebody, and that will create a pain point within us that can serve as a spark to ignite us to be bothered and then to start to think about potential solutions or ways that we might change things in our lives. And Brian Stevenson, social justice activist, says, be proximate, which means that you want to be close to the problems that you're trying to solve. For example, if you're interested in sustainability and the environment, you might want to go to regions where people are deeply suffering from what's happening. For me, I'm in the hospital. I moved actually my laboratory from Cambridge to Boston and actually in the Longwood area to actually being inside the hospital, because get bothered to me is by seeing patients every day as I'm going into my office. That's a motivator that we need to keep going. We need to be persistent. There's a sense of urgency. And so I think that to me, get bothered is really all about tapping into the pain points that are around us and sort of using them, almost kind of doing judo on them in a way, to use them as a motivator to help us to keep moving forward and to act with a sense of urgency.
As you're answering that question, I'm thinking of Chip and Dan Heath's book, Switch, and their concept of shaping the path. So in some ways, you're shaping the path to ensure that you stay focused and committed on the things you, again, know that you want to be doing. So you're creating an ecosystem or an environment where these things are front of mind and keep you going.
Absolutely. Yeah. Because it's so easy to be sidetracked today. And, we were talking about all this marketing and advertising and all these forces that we're up against. And I think in some ways we're just inundated with information and with data. And it's like the cues that we get from our minds and our bodies, our interactions from other people, they are kind of get lost in the fog and the clouds that are around us. And those cues can turn into pain points that can motivate us to act. And so what can happen is if we don't sort of have strategies in our lives to connect with those cues, we can miss picking up on these pain points, and we can go down paths that lead us in directions where we don't feel fulfilled, where we're not fully aligned with our values. Unfortunately, it's become very easy to go down those paths these days just because of all the information and, sort of like this digital age that we exist within. And so I think having strategies, like even just pausing in our day in between meetings, I found can be really critical. I used to do the back-to-back meetings all through the day, and I get to the end of the day and be like, wow, I just did 2 marathons worth of work today and feel great. But I realized I was missing all these higher value opportunities and that it was just taking a big toll on me. And I realized if I pause in between my meetings, for example, just 10 minutes and not do email or not do text messaging, just go for a walk or close my eyes, that all of a sudden it's like what the person just spoke to me about, it's connecting with things someone spoke to, like I had a conversation the week before or the month before, or the year before, and I'm sort of making these connections that I wouldn't have otherwise, or I'm tuning into cues that I got when I'm interacting with this person that I want to think more about. I want to focus my attention on. I want to change something in how I interact with other people. And if I don't pause, I'm not open to these cues and these opportunities to evolve.
Yeah. And you also write about your life as a husband and as a parent of 2 children. And that also what you're just talking about, taking a pause and realizing that you were kind of missing out on being available and present for those experiences with your kids as well. So you've applied this to all areas of your life, right?
That, has been huge. So many things I could say, but, I did get to the point where I had become a workaholic at one point, and that had gone on actually for many years. I was just addicted to the dopamine. And I think that I needed to find a new way of being, a new approaches, new things to experiment with. Meditation had never worked for me before, but my wife was getting into various realms of spirituality. And I started to think, okay, I need to learn about this. This is something that I really need. That had this pain point. I was bothered. And so I asked my wife to introduce me to the people she was interacting with. I started experimenting with various forms of meditation. And I found one, TM, or transcendental meditation. There's this one word, this mantra, where you say it over and over. And by the way, I did it for a few months. I find I don't, with any practice, sometimes the practice can get in the way of what you're trying to actually do. But doing it for a few months, 20 minutes in the morning and the evening, it gave me this awareness of the thoughts and the emotions associated with the thoughts are fleeting. They don't last forever. In fact, a lot of them will go away relatively quickly within tens of seconds or a minute or two. And I started to realize that as I'm interacting with people that I love and want to really connect deeply with, that there's an energy of the conversation that, like, if I'm having a conversation with my son or my daughter, for example, and I feel the urge to say something. I mean, it happens all the time. And, or pull out my phone and be like, hey, take a look at this. I realize the attention shifts from them to me, and then they stop speaking. And that's not my intention. My intention is to support them to find their voice and to express themselves. And so I've been able to use, the concepts and the tools in LIT to be able to develop emotional regulation so that I can press pause in conversations and not intercept or interject conversations and be able to let things kind of pass. And whenever that happens now, I kind of have this little check mark in my mind because I'm like, that's a win. That's a win. And that makes me feel good that I was able to sort of stop myself from saying something and continue to be intentional with the conversations with my family.
Yeah, I mean, that's the goal. That is not easy to do. It's great that you've been able to do that. It occurs to me when reading your book about these life ignition tools that a lot of neurodivergent kids kind of naturally do the things that you're recommending, but that these are things that aren't necessarily, I think, encouraged or celebrated in traditional learning environments. Yeah, I'm thinking about being relentlessly curious, being a deep diver into areas of interest. So just as a way to kind of sum up or wrap up our conversation, do you have any thoughts about ways that we, listeners of this show, can try to encourage this paradigm shift in some of these institutions or even in our families so that we can be more excited about embracing these concepts?
Yeah, absolutely. I love that question. I think one thing that we can do is to have more conversations about our self-evolution and our personal development. I think in our current sort of society, it doesn't seem like we're having enough conversations around that and the vulnerabilities and the challenges that we're facing and what we're doing to address those challenges. To have more transparency, I think is really important for a child to see a parent being vulnerable and going through a challenging time and then seeing them experiment with various strategies, some not working, some working, and sort of seeing them go through that, I think can be really positive experience for everybody. And I think that as we start to embrace that more and sort of use this unbelievable brain that we all have. I mean, we have this incredible machinery and we're using such a small fraction of it. I think as we start to tap into that, like, the prefrontal cortex in our brain is just massive and it's where we do our emotional regulation and our planning and problem solving. We have this amazing ability for neuroplasticity to rewire our brains. It's constantly rewiring, but we can choose to do intentional things in our lives and rewire our brains in intentional ways. And so I think using that consciousness and talking about it can really maximize the ripple effect. And I think that when we do that, it starts filtering into our work. I think that's what's going to help in a major way sort of change the institutions and the powers to be and focus the development of sort of new technology around that. But I think, we talk about a ripple effect for everything, but to me, the ripple effect needs to be amplified. And that happens when we have conversations, when we really sort of set an intention to not just work on things and evolve ourselves, but discuss it with other people and talk about what works and what doesn't work and start really making that the focus of our conversations with other people.
That's great. Thank you. And this is one such conversation, I'm just going to say. So listeners, you're all part of this conversation as well. You can share this conversation and have more conversations about this. So, well, thank you so much. Is there anything that we didn't cover that you would really want my listeners to know or think about?
To me, this is, a wonderful conversation. And I think one thing is there's so many simple things that we can do in our day to just change things up a little bit and bring in fresh energy and help us look at the world through different lenses. And one of the things that I think all listeners potentially could try if they're not already doing it is something that I do every day that's really changed my life, which is I cycle through my senses when I walk outside. And so I'll say sight. And as I walk in my neighborhood, I'll look at the trees and the texture of the bark, and I'll look at the shape of the trunk, and I'll look at the tops of the trees and the clouds. And then I'll say hearing, and I'll listen for the birds, and I'll listen for the wind rustling in the leaves. And then I'll say touch, and I'll feel the clothes against my skin. I'll slow down. I'll feel my heel hit the ground, the wind against my face. And what I'm doing is so many things are happening actually in a really positive way. I'm connecting more deeply with the world around me. I'm actually practicing focusing my attention. I'm resensitizing my senses, my aliveness. It's our senses is how we interact with the world, and, kind of one by one. And then even, when I eat, I'll close my eyes for a few bites and I'll notice the shift in the experience of the different flavors. And to me, this is something we can all practice or, experiment with. It literally changed my life, because now when I walk outside, I'm more likely to look at a tree, kind of be connected with it. Like I'll walk and my eyes will be kind of stuck on the tree because I'm now thinking about it. And whereas previously my eyes would be just jumping all around, almost like looking at a screen and, kind of looking at all the crazy things going on our devices. So I feel like, it's a way to connect more deeply with the world, to resensitize our aliveness, to help us focus our attention. And it helps us also tap into our very powerful biology that nobody can take away from us.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that practice. That it's inspiring for me to think about doing that as well. Again, listeners, the book is called LIT, which stands for Life Ignition Tools. The subtitles: Use Nature's Playbook to Energize Your Brain, Spark Ideas, and Ignite Action. And it is a book that will definitely get you thinking and excited about thinking. So thank you so much, listeners. I will have links in the show notes pages for where you can connect with Jeff and learn more about his work. And I just want to thank you for this wonderful conversation today.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I've enjoyed it a lot.
You've been listening to the Tilt Parenting Podcast. To learn more about today's guest and the resources we talked about, check out the extensive show notes page on Tilt Parenting. There you'll find key takeaways, links to all the resources mentioned, and even a full transcript of our conversation. Just go to tiltparenting.com/podcast and select this episode. If you're looking for personal support from me and connection with the phenomenal community of parents raising neurodivergent kids, join us in the recently rebooted Differently Wired Club. The new Differently Wired Club can help you cultivate the positive shifts you're hoping for. Go to tiltparenting.com/club to learn more. The Tilt Parenting Podcast is hosted by me, Debbie Reber, author of Differently Wired and the founder of Tilt Parenting, and was edited by Andrea Curtis Amasquita. To support this show, please join my Patreon campaign, where you can set up a small monthly contribution. Just go to patreon.com/tiltparenting to learn more. If you want to follow Tilt on social media, you can find us at @tiltparenting on Instagram and Facebook. And lastly, please take a minute to leave a 5-star rating or review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. That helps this show stay visible so others can find it more easily. And that's all for this week. Stay safe, stay well, and take good care. And for more information about any of the parenting resources Tilt offers, visit tiltparenting.com.
Are you overwhelmed by the things that get in the way of you doing what you want to do? Are you looking for ways to simplify life to better align with your values? Do you want to create space in your schedule so you have room for more of the good stuff? Play, joy, relationships, gratitude, and more? If you answered yes to any of these questions, I invite you to check out Edit Your Life, a podcast to help you edit the unnecessary from your life so you have more room to enjoy the awesome. Through episodes with me, Christine Coe, and a range of super smart, compassionate, and thoughtful guests, you'll come away with big picture insights and practical ways to declutter your home, schedule, and mental space without getting bogged down by perfection. I have always believed that small moments and actions matter tremendously. My goal is to help you find agency and space in your life through doable baby steps that will leave you feeling accomplished instead of overwhelmed. Check out Edit Your Life wherever you enjoy your podcasts.